A strange report from Laramie. When word first reached the city of Laramie in 1892 that a train had been robbed with the help of a monkey, people weren't sure whether to laugh or gasp. It sounded like something out of a dime novel or a prank played by a bored telegraph operator. The initial wire report was brief and almost unbelievable. A westbound Union Pacific Express had been held up by bandits, and among their number was an agile little creature, reportedly a monkey, that played a key role in the heist. For a frontier community used to all manner of outrageous tales, this one still managed to raise eyebrows. A monkey robbing a train. The local newspaper editor at the Laramie Boomerang paused, reread the message, and likely wondered if someone was testing his gullibility. Yet the report was there in black and white, demanding to be taken seriously, or at least investigated. To understand why this story was so shocking, it helps to remember that train robberies were almost routine in the American West of the late 19th century. Ever since railroads began crisscrossing the continent, outlaws had targeted trains as rolling treasure troves. By the 1890s, the twilight of the Wild West, hold-ups of locomotives had become infamous events, often romanticized in newspapers and dime novels. These crimes were especially common. In that era, committed by gangs with colorful names and fearsome reputations. In fact, 1892 itself was a banner year for bold train robbers. That summer, the Dalton Gang, one of the most notorious outlaw bands, brazenly held up a Santa Fe Railroad train in Oklahoma Territory, hoping to snatch a $75,000 fortune being shipped on board. They only got away with about $11,000 after failing to crack one of the safes, but the audacity of their attempt made headlines. Everyone in places like Wyoming knew the names of robbers like Jesse James, Butch Cassidy, and Blackjack Ketchum, criminals who became legends for targeting the rails. Train robbery was dangerous, but it could be very lucrative, with thousands of dollars in cash, gold, or valuables up for grabs on a single lucky score. But no matter how daring those bandits were, none of their escapades involved what Laramie's strange report described. Guns and dynamite, horses and disguises, those were expected. A living, breathing monkey accomplice. That was something new entirely. In the annals of the Wild West, there were stories of clever outlaw tricks, from boarding moving trains on horseback to posing as passengers. Yet a monkey joining the gang was beyond anyone's imagination. The sheer absurdity of it is part of why the news from Laramie spread so quickly. In saloons and general stores, folks repeated the tale with amused disbelief. "Did you hear? Some gang used a monkey to rob a train." It was the kind of anecdote that provoked laughter, nervous chuckles, and even a few shivers, because if true, it meant the frontier had just gotten a little stranger and a lot less predictable. According to the initial telegram that reached Laramie, the incident occurred on a remote stretch of track somewhere out in the high desert beyond the city. The train in question was a night express heading westward across southern Wyoming, carrying a mix of passengers, mail, and a safe full of money bound for banks or payroll offices further down the line. It likely left Cheyenne earlier that day and chugged through Laramie in the late afternoon, making its way toward Rawlins and the territories beyond. Nothing seemed amiss as it departed Laramie, just another routine run across windswept plains and rocky basins. The sun set, twilight faded, and the train, a steam locomotive pulling a handful of cars, forged into the sparsely populated expanse where the only signs of civilization were telegraph poles clicking beside the rails. Somewhere out there in the darkness, so the report claimed, a small gang of outlaws set their plan in motion. The telegraph message that arrived in Laramie was scant on details, but sketched a sensational scene. As the train slowed at a water stop, or perhaps due to a false flag signal placed by the gang, 2 or 3 armed bandits emerged from hiding. They clambered aboard the locomotive and, with pistols leveled, forced the engineer and fireman to halt the train. Simultaneously, another robber, and here was the curious part, unleashed a trained monkey onto the train. Witnesses later described seeing a little brown or grey monkey, nimble and quick, scampering among the cars in the chaos of the hold-up. Before anyone fully understood what was happening, the bandits had seized control of the train. The express car, which held the safe of valuables, was isolated. The guard in that car found himself confronted not just by armed men, but by a chattering primate intruder that had somehow gotten inside. Moments later, the safe was opened and the loot taken. The bandits and the monkey vanished into the night, and the train was left sitting, forlorn, in the middle of nowhere. It's no wonder the telegraph operator in Laramie had to reread such a report multiple times. This was a far cry from the typical robbery template everyone knew. By the time the wire was forwarded to the local paper, the Laramie Boomerang, even the veteran newsman there didn't know what to make of it. The Boomerang's editor, famous for his frontier sense of humor, the paper itself had been named after his pet mule, might initially have suspected a hoax or an exaggerated yarn. Was someone out there poking fun at the press with a tall tale of a monkey bandit? Editors in the 1890s had seen their share of hoaxes in the news, so a healthy skepticism was natural. One can imagine the newsroom discussion that night. Could this story be true? If it was a prank, it was certainly an elaborate one. But if it wasn't, then history had just been made in the most bizarre way. Ultimately, the facts, as reported, were too intriguing to ignore. The Boomerang decided to run the story, albeit cautiously, making sure to note that it was based on wire reports from railroad officials and witnesses. The headline, we can picture it now, practically wrote itself, something along the lines of "Train robbed, bandits and a monkey astound railway crew." Readers the next morning must have spilled their coffee in surprise. A sense of astonishment rippled through Laramie and neighboring towns. Frontier communities prided themselves on having seen it all, but this was a new one. Some locals joked that maybe the outlaws ran out of men and had to recruit a monkey for the job. Others speculated in earnest. Perhaps the animal was trained to pick locks or crawl into tight spaces, making it the perfect secret weapon for a heist. The story raised almost as many questions as it answered. As tongues wagged and eyes widened, lawmen in Wyoming also took notice. A train robbery, monkey or no monkey, was a serious crime that demanded a response. Posses were likely organized quickly. Telegraph lines carried descriptions of the robbers and the primate to law enforcement officers up and down the line. For the moment, however, the perpetrators had vanished into the wilderness, and in Laramie, all anyone had to go on were those strange second-hand reports coming in via telegraph. So, did a monkey really help rob a train under the Wyoming stars? To find the truth, we need to step back and retrace the events leading up to this extraordinary hold-up. In the following chapter, we will explore the key pieces of the puzzle: the train itself, its route, its cargo, its unwitting passengers, as well as the band of outlaws bold enough to attempt such a caper, and the ingenious or insane plan they devised. Only by examining the train, the bandits, and the plan can we begin to understand how something as incredible as a train robbery with a monkey might have been pulled off. The train, the bandits, and the plan. The train involved in the now infamous 1892 robbery was not a luxury express, nor a military transport. It was a modest Union Pacific westbound freight and mail train, with only a few passenger cars hitched behind the main engine. Its route carried it along the southern edge of Wyoming's high plains, a stretch of track known for its isolation. It was the kind of route that passed through long miles of nothing, interrupted only by tiny water stops and telegraph shacks. Railway records indicate the train left Cheyenne mid-morning on a cool spring day, carrying scheduled mail deliveries, a few dozen passengers, and one strongbox in the express car destined for a bank in Ogden, Utah. On board was a trusted crew: engineer Wesley Hartman, fireman Eli Bowers, and express guard Thomas J. Clegg, a retired cavalry sergeant with a reputation for vigilance. Nothing seemed unusual about the trip. The manifest was light and weather fair. The robbery was timed to occur between Laramie and a small, barely charted siding called Dry Fork, a stretch of wilderness with no stations, no towns, and no witnesses. What makes this story stranger is the planning involved. According to later testimonies gathered by a Wyoming territory marshal, the gang had scoped out this route for weeks. One member of the crew reportedly had previous experience with railway timing and may have worked as a brakeman years prior. Another was said to be a vaudeville performer, possibly the one who trained the monkey. The plan, as reconstructed from limited sources, was this: the gang would use a false signal lamp to flag down the train just past the Dry Fork curve. While the engineer and fireman were forced to stop and disembark at gunpoint, another man would climb into the express car from the rear. This was where the monkey came in. Described as small, fast, and disturbingly intelligent, the monkey was released into the express car through a broken roof vent or a forced hatch. Guard Clegg was caught off guard, quite literally. The animal is said to have shrieked, flung papers, and distracted the guard, while one of the men slipped inside and cracked open the strongbox using a railway key or a skeleton lock. The operation took less than 10 minutes. The monkey wasn't just a novelty. According to one source in the Cheyenne Daily Press, the animal may have been trained to retrieve small items or carry a pouch. Clegg later insisted that the monkey had wrapped its tail around a lamp hook and was shrieking inches from his face, causing him to drop his revolver. By the time he recovered, the car was empty, the lock forced, and the strongbox cleaned out. The gang disappeared with a haul valued at nearly $9,000, a fortune in 1892. Most surprising, however, was how cleanly it was done. No gunshots, no injuries, just a bizarre, calculated theft aided by an animal accomplice. The idea that someone had thought to use a monkey as part of a coordinated train robbery was baffling. Some saw it as a sign of dangerous intelligence, others as an act of theatrical absurdity. Either way, the bandits were gone, and so was the monkey. The monkey unleashed. Accounts of the monkey's behavior during the robbery are as conflicting as they are bizarre. According to several scattered newspaper reports and oral retellings, the creature seemed unusually responsive to commands. Witnesses claimed the monkey wore a tiny satchel, perhaps used to transport smaller items or tools. One rail worker who arrived after the fact described scattered documents, overturned ink bottles, and a trail of tiny footprints across the express car floor. Guard Thomas Clegg, shaken and humiliated, offered a detailed, if surreal, account. He stated that the monkey leapt onto his chest the moment he turned his back, clinging and shrieking with terrifying intensity. In the chaos, the guard dropped both his weapon and his lamp, which extinguished in the fall. It was at this moment, according to Clegg, that a masked man entered through the rear vestibule and cracked open the lockbox. Whether the monkey had been trained to disarm Clegg or merely served as a time distraction remains unknown. There were other oddities. The monkey reportedly darted in and out of compartments, pulling open drawers and scattering keys. A telegraph clerk later claimed to have seen the animal sitting atop the engine's coal tender just before the train was stopped. Another report suggested it had been wearing a tiny black vest. This strange spectacle caused momentary paralysis among the crew. Engineer Hartman later wrote that the surrealism of the situation delayed any rational response. It was like seeing a circus act in a nightmare, he supposedly said. The thing screamed like a person and moved faster than any dog. Some speculated the monkey was not simply trained, but conditioned through repetition. Its movements were too precise to be random. It knew where to go. It knew what to do. Who trained it, and for how long? There are theories, none confirmed. One posits that the vaudeville performer among the gang had stolen the monkey from a traveling act. Another claims the animal had once been kept at a mining camp to retrieve tools from small tunnels. Still others believe the monkey had been raised in captivity by one of the bandits from a young age. Regardless of origin, what is clear is that the monkey's role in the heist was far more than incidental. It was instrumental. As quickly as the gang appeared, they vanished. The monkey, too, was never recovered. Some joked it had made off with the loot all on its own. Others, more grimly, believed the animal was discarded in the desert to erase evidence. But no remains were ever found. What lingered instead was a story, part truth, part myth, fully unforgettable. The monkey had entered history not as a pet or curiosity, but as a criminal accessory, a silent partner in one of the strangest robberies the West had ever seen. A clean escape into the desert. In the moments following the robbery, the landscape surrounding the train remained eerily still. The bandits had chosen their timing well, twilight fading into full night, visibility low, and no stations for miles. Engineer Hartman, still shaken, was ordered at gunpoint to walk 30 yards into the brush and wait. When he returned, the robbers and their animal accomplice were gone. Investigators later concluded that the gang escaped on horseback. Tracks were found leading southward from the train's last stop, hoofprints, wagon ruts, and what appeared to be small paw prints alongside. It was unclear whether the monkey had been carried or had ridden on someone's shoulder. Either way, they vanished into the folds of the desert as if they'd rehearsed it 100 times. Lawmen from Cheyenne and Laramie were quick to respond. Telegrams flew up and down the line. Posses formed within hours, yet they found nothing. No bodies, no discarded gear, no hideouts. The terrain offered infinite places to vanish. Dry arroyos, abandoned mining shafts, and wind-carved canyons. By the time searchers arrived, any trail had gone cold. What confounded authorities most was the professionalism of it all. Most train robbers made mistakes. Too much dynamite, lingering too long, leaving behind names or tokens. Not these men. They left no fingerprints, no nicknames, no drunken brags in saloons. They seemed to dissolve into the sagebrush. There were reports, of course. A rancher near the Colorado line claimed to have seen 3 riders with a covered pack horse heading west. A boy in Green River swore he saw a monkey peering out from a feed sack at a rail yard, but nothing solid. No arrests were made. The Union Pacific quietly posted a $2,000 reward. The railroad, unwilling to publicly admit it had been outsmarted by a gang with a monkey, kept details minimal in official statements. Internally, however, it caused waves. Security protocols were reviewed. Express guards were retrained. Some routes even experimented with double-manning their express cars. In Laramie, the boomerang printed follow-ups for a few more days. Then, as attention drifted elsewhere, cattle thefts, drought warnings, political scandals, the story faded. Like the bandits themselves, the monkey vanished from the public eye. But whispers remained, especially in back rooms and card tables, where old-timers told of the strangest train robbery ever attempted. It was the escape that sealed the legend. Not just that they got away, but how smoothly they vanished. A gang like that doesn't improvise. They study, they scout, they vanish. And somewhere, out past the buttes and ridges, they melted back into the country, with $9,000 and a monkey. The disappearing story. For something so outrageous, the robbery vanished from headlines faster than anyone expected. Within a week, the story all but disappeared from most major regional papers. The Laramie Boomerang ran only 2 more articles, both brief updates that added no new facts. The Cheyenne Daily Press dismissed the entire event as a hoax. Even the Union Pacific's internal memos, released decades later, make only vague reference to an unusual breach in standard protocol. Why the sudden silence? One theory is embarrassment. The idea that a powerful railroad could be bested by a gang that included a monkey was more than just humorous. It was humiliating. Admitting it publicly might have undermined confidence in the railroad's security. Others believe the story was deliberately downplayed to avoid inspiring copycats or stoking the romanticism of outlaw culture. If bandits and circus animals could outwit trained guards, what next? Still, traces of the story remained, archived in small-town newspapers, scrawled in sheriff's ledgers, whispered in jailhouse conversations. One particularly curious item appeared 3 months later in the Rock Springs Gazette. A letter to the editor from a reader claiming to have seen the monkey again, this time sitting on a hitching post outside a general store in Idaho. The letter ends abruptly, with no follow-up. A railroad detective named Marion Pike reportedly pursued the case for nearly a year. His notebooks, discovered in a trunk after his death, describe interviews with rail workers, miners, and even performers from a traveling show. All dead ends. Pike's last entry, dated April 1893, reads, "The monkey is the key, but the key's gone." Whether covered up or simply forgotten, the monkey robbery slid quietly into obscurity. It became a piece of frontier trivia, told more in jest than in earnest. Some historians dismissed it as fabrication. Others pointed to the consistency of early reports and the specificity of certain details. Trained animals were not unheard of on the frontier. Monkeys were rare, but not impossible. Traveling circuses, private collectors, and exotics dealers had brought such creatures west before. And then there's the sketch, the strangest part of all. Filed in the back pages of a tattered scrapbook kept by a telegraph operator from Medicine Bow was a single pencil drawing. A monkey, mid-leap, wearing a small top hat and what appears to be a gun belt. Was it drawn from memory? Imagination? A joke between railmen? No one knows. But the image, now yellowed with time, remains one of the last surviving artifacts of that unbelievable night. The story, it seemed, had done what the gang did, slipped away without a trace. The sketch, the silence, and the doubt. Today, the story of the 1892 monkey-assisted train robbery lives in a liminal space, half remembered, half dismissed, never fully believed. Historians mention it in footnotes, old-timers retell it with a grin, and railroad enthusiasts debate its plausibility. What started as a wild report in a frontier newspaper has become a ghost of a story, flickering between history and legend. Skeptics argue it was all a fabrication, a hoax spread by bored telegraph operators or a publicity stunt by the newspaper. There were, after all, no arrests, no formal charges, and no recovered loot. In the archives, the robbery is barely a blip, And yet details persist. The matching reports from different towns, the sketch from Medicine Bow, the diary of Detective Pike. Too specific to be a pure invention, too strange to be accepted without question. If it was real, then someone trained an animal to perform as part of a coordinated crime. That alone would make it one of the most inventive and bizarre robberies in American history. But if it wasn't, then the story is something else entirely. A frontier myth, born of the weird twilight between truth and folklore. What happened to the gang? What happened to the monkey? Did they split the money and vanish into Mexico? Did the animal die in the desert? Or is it possible that somewhere, buried in a canyon or under floorboards in a ghost town, sits a tin strongbox, still unopened, waiting to be discovered? The sketch remains, the story lingers, and the truth, like the monkey, has yet to be caught.